Good conversation, and I don't want to cut that off because that really is, I think, the most important thing here, rather than me just dumping information on you. I'm going to depend on Kevin or Dave to throttle me when it's time for us to break for lunch, because we sure don't want to miss lunch. It wouldn't be a Baptist meeting if we didn't do that. So let's give you a chance for a few more questions or comments before we move on with things. You know, I do want to spend, as we move into this afternoon, we're going to spend more time this way than me dumping information on you. But you know, right now, you know, questions or objections or comments, observations you've had from this first place, and from a chance to meet with your colleagues during lunch. What's going on?
Back here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Kevin's blocking me as always.
Yeah.
This ties in especially with family churches, but I don't even think just family churches. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a perception that pastors are the consummate insiders in a church, right? And it's always been my observation that the pastor and his family are likely the most consummate outsiders, because we're not from the community.
Yeah, that's right.
And we could go on and talk about that forever, but we don't have that history.
Yeah.
So maybe saying something about leading, maybe there needs to be more materials on leading as an outsider.
Yeah.
Because in essence, that is what we are.
That's right.
In many cases.
That's right. It is absolutely true that in the family church, the pastor never joins the church. You're never a member of the church. You may be a respected outsider, but the chances of becoming a member in that church are slim and none, even after a lot of years.
Unless you get adopted by one of the families.
That's right. That's right. The gatekeepers, and Arlen talks about those. If you've got a gatekeeper who advocates you or makes you an adoption, that changes things. But in terms of just showing up and being a member of the church, it ain't going to happen. And this is one of the ways that pastoral-sized churches are a lot like family churches. Even though they will have a different level of respect and expectation for pastoral leadership, you're never quite on the inside. The communication circles all around you. You're the last one to know what's happening on anything. Like me and Dean Brewer. I have no idea who called Dean. How did he get that information? I didn't call him. Did Ralph call him before he left the farm? I'm not sure Ralph did, because Ralph didn't act like he was expecting him to show up. But somehow or other, the information got out there, and Dean showed up, and that's pretty typical. It really is. Leading as an outsider is a different way of leadership for us, and it calls for a level of patience and integrity that few of us have, and certainly is inconsistent with the leadership models that we've had that are aggressive and like Attila the Hun at work. It just doesn't work in those churches. So. Yes, sir.
In doing research and by way of whatever you're involved in, why is it that these new startup churches, are thriving, and churches that have been around for a long time are just trying to survive? What are the factors in regards to that? What is it that they're doing that we just might not do? Sure.
That is an important question. There's a lot of work going on with that, and also some misconceptions. 80% of those church starts fail, and we don't hear about them. And that's comparable to new business starts too. We like to tout new business people and entrepreneurs and all that kind of stuff, but I think the numbers are like 85% there don't make it 5 years. I think one of the things that they're doing different is that they are tapping into the situation that they find themselves in, which includes folks who have been damaged by church someplace else or want nothing to do with church the way it is now. And they find the newness of a start that doesn't have the baggage of organization and the baggage of expectations, a safe place for them to be. Now, I'm going to use that safe language later on, and I don't mean physically safe. I mean, church for most people in the country right now that are not part of church is not a safe place for them to go to publicly because they don't know the building, they don't know the people, they don't know what happens there. And so creating a new safe place really is an important way for these folks to connect. And I think that's a key piece of that, is that it's a safe place for folks who've been damaged or excluded from churches and other places. And the message from that, then, for me, for existing churches, is we have to work on our hospitality. And hospitality is more than me giving you a red ribbon and making you stand out in the room about being a quote visitor in the church. It means some authentic attempts at being relational with folks. And making sure that they're as comfortable as they can be in that new space, and recognizing that it's uncomfortable for them. If you don't know what's happening in the church, the bulletin doesn't help you most of the time. And it seems like we haven't decided what the bulletin is. Is the bulletin there to help people understand what's happening in worship? Is the bulletin a newsletter or of events that are happening inside the church that nobody knows anything about? Is the bulletin a hidden stage direction for folks? We haven't made up our minds about that yet. And that's something, one of the ways we need to help folks. I find it fascinating that so many of those churches will do their web page, and there's a tab click across the top, what to expect. And it describes a worship service. It describes the layout of the church, maybe some pictures. This is where the kids go. This is where you get coffee, and the coffee's free, and you're allowed to bring it into the sanctuary. This is the clothing that we expect you to wear, or that other members wear here. This is how long the service is going to go. I mean, stuff that those of us that grow up in church, this is stupid. Everybody, no, they don't know it. They don't know it, and it makes it an awkward place for them to be. That help any? Okay. What else we got? Yes, sir.
I'd like to say I think I went into a family church 40 years ago, and like the pastors, I'm still not a full-fledged member of that church after 40 years. And when we get new people come into the church, as soon as there's a conflict, the family people can weather it. The new people are gone. Yeah. And we got to somehow combine everybody.
Yeah. Now, I think one of the cultural things that's happening to us, and I've got to think some more about this, I think we've become conflict averse, avoidance. We like to avoid conflict. At the same time, it seems like so many of us are on a hair trigger all the time. The violent stuff that we've seen in the last few months all across this country in lots of different kinds of settings reflects a trigger response to situations that I don't think was the case 25 years ago. And my wife works in the middle school, and when they have fights the first day of school that end up with 3 being expelled, something's crazy. I mean, and middle school kids bringing guns and knives to school, and the worst thing you can do is dismiss somebody because that's guaranteed to trigger a fight. To walk away from things is something that we're not able to do anymore. I don't know what that's all about, but I think that's true, that folks will cut and run rather than face the conflict. I really do. And the others are staying because it's their church. So, good observations. Yes, sir.
I was interested in your discussion about the types of churches because, in my words at least, churches have personalities.
Yes, yes.
Personalities. And then this gentleman over here mentioned he took a career counseling kind of thing, and they said his personality was such that he would fit this with that. Now, I've been on multiple search committees, and I have to say, unless I was asleep, I was never really introduced to the fact that we should be looking for a personality type to be, and what is our church personality?
Yeah.
You know, when you lead search groups in your region, do you discuss this?
Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, it is part of the interview process, and it is a training thing. I would say to folks on search committee, don't talk about personality types. The kinds of questions you need to have is, describe for me the church setting that's ideal for you. Describe for me how a church business meeting would go for you. Describe for me, if you had a new idea, how you would go about that, getting that to happen. Those are the things that, and if things go up, that couldn't work here. You're talking about mismatched things, but those are the kinds of questions that need to be asked. The truth is, I'll get in trouble here, Kevin, if I have to leave. You tell me.
Lunch is coming.
What translation you use is not the question to ask. It's really not. You need to ask church life questions and how they're going to behave and respond to those things. That help any? Good. Did I see a hand over here?
I'm over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a pastor of a church that's pastoral size, I would say. But I refer to us as a multi-generational church. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is our biggest problem. Yeah. That, it's supposed to be a strength, all ages here. But how do we're functioning as if everybody was of the builder generation. Yeah. And that is, it's no longer. That's the right way. Right. That's exactly the feeling. Except it doesn't work. How, and yet we're not large enough to say, we'll do some special things for the millennials or the Gen Xers. We've got some, and I know that puts us ahead of some other folks. Yeah. I'm afraid we're not going to hold on to them. I mean, how do we make that transition? Well, first of all, let me affirm you that you've been given a special gift there, and learning to do intergenerational stuff really is a key thing. How old is the church, can I ask? 160. Really? When did this happen? When did this has it always been multi-generational, or has that happened in fairly recent history? I think it's always been multi-generational. Okay, so they're used to dealing with things that way. So but the oldest generation was always in charge. Of course. And that generation kept living. Yeah. I remember died at 65. So my mother was a leader at 35. And, I'm still kind of a young kid in the 50s from this perspective. It's like that great song from Les Miserables, "We're Still Here." That's right. I think where the change is that generation did die when their parents. Yeah, it is one of the generational challenges that we face today. Is that for the first time in history, we're dealing with 4 and 5 generations alive in the church. And yes, there have always been elders there, but there's never been great numbers. It's never been the numbers like we've got right now. If churches are going to have any hope of moving through that, we've got to find a way to do multi-generational stuff in churches that don't have the capacity to have 75 in a youth group and 75 in a boomer group and whatever else. But the other thing is, and I'll get in trouble here too, Kevin, we've all talked about the exodus of younger people from the church. Listen to me now.
there is another exodus that's about to happen. As boomers retire, if they don't learn something meaningful to do in church, they're out of there. Because they're getting tired of committees too. And they're not going to do senior ministries the way my mama did. And the church that does not come up with a meaningful way to engage those folks in Christian mission and ministry, they're going to be out the door as soon as that retirement check comes the first time, because that's going to signify a lot of things to them, and one of it's going to be the freedom of that institution that's been bugging them for a long time. That's not much help. I'm sorry. I sympathize with the challenge on that. But I do think the intergenerational stuff, that's the only way we're going to settle this stuff over the tattoos that was mentioned here a minute ago. And it's going to happen in the smaller churches where they're used to doing relational stuff. In a big church, you can stay distant. They can be halfway across the sanctuary, and I don't have to look at those ugly tattoos. But when there's 75 of us in worship, and the kid is sitting, 2 pews up from me, I can't help but see the earrings and all that stuff. And I got to make peace with that somehow. I got to make peace with that person somehow or other. And I do think we've got to do that. I'm encouraged to see more multi-generational stuff out there. One of the great failings, confess some for myself. I grew up Southern Baptist, a long time ago in a galaxy far away, all that stuff, and started out as a Christian educator. I have every certificate that the Sunday school board gave. I know how to organize Sunday school. I know how to age grade. I know how to do all that stuff. Friend, there's no future in that. We've got to mix genders. We've got to mix ages on things. And I'm encouraged to see that stuff happening now, that people are developing resources for that. Yes, ma'am.
I was thinking about the gentleman with the tattoos because it resonates with all of us. I want to share what our pastor did in our church. Yeah, I'm sitting in front of me, so I have to hear myself. But, we had this wonderful girl who just loved Jesus. She didn't have tattoos, but she had purple hair this week. She had red hair next week. Black was something. Long black hair with black clothes. Yeah. But she loved Jesus. She learned how to play the guitar. Yeah. She didn't sing well. But our pastor allowed her to lead worship for not the regular service, but not the traditional service, but the contemporary service. But, she loved Jesus. Yeah. She wore those short skirts, I'm hoping that somebody did tell her to put pants on underneath. It's like a long But that's what we are facing, and we do need to love these folks. Yeah. And if they wear some top that's down to here, some gentle lady does need to mention that when she leans over. But, I was really thinking about our pastor who used this guy who loved Jesus. Yeah. And she did well. So I think that we can use these folks. We can get used to them because they need us to get used to them.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. That reminds me. One of the things that calls to mind is knowing that she loved Jesus. Many of us grew up in churches where the testimony time was one of those things, and we got away from that because it got crazy. We all admit, it got crazy. But what we gave up in not doing that was the opportunity to hear from one another that they love Jesus. Singing might be the way for her to do that, or somebody else. But folks need to hear one another say, "I love Jesus," and what Jesus has done for me. And that changes the shade on those tattoos and all that stuff. That changes the 3-piece suit that the kid has seen that grandfather wear, to understand that they love Jesus, and that's what we need to find some ways, and that's one of the great strengths of small churches, is you've got a venue to be able to, you can't do that in 500 people. But a church with 75 on Sunday morning, you can take a couple minutes and do that. and find a way to do it constructively with some boundaries, maybe coaching the folks that are going to be giving the testimonies so that you're not surprised what happens, but I think that may be important. Somebody else. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm going to share something I read this past week
Yeah.
on talking about context and setting for churches. This comes from a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Church.
Yeah.
In a promotion for his new book, Focus, Levitt H. Reams Jr. suggests another question for us to reflect on. If the percentage of married couples with young children has declined by half since the 1950s, why is that still the group we focus most on?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It is, I am not anti-young people. Don't hear that. There are places and churches that need to be working on attracting young people. But there are places and churches that need to be working on boomers and 60-year-olds. All of them aren't in church. All of them have not confessed Christ. All of them are not engaged in God's mission here on earth. We are turning our backs to a capacity that we've got to attract something that's probably not going to happen in doing that. It's key to understanding who we are and what the vision is that we've been given, what our mission is here in this time and place. How are we doing on time, Kevin? 5 minutes? Okay, so maybe one or two more questions. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
First steps to follow. We had when we started out with a lot of the older adults, I started off in Southern Baptist Church also, and we had a term there that I'm sure you're familiar with. When you walk into a church, the back of the church looks like a cotton field, because of all the white hair that's in there. And what really grew our church with young people was, and we have a lot, and that was that, as Miss Martin said, and I just had to touch on that, I don't think that our adults and our churches are getting to know the young people. They don't see how much they love Jesus.
Right.
And I'll tell you, if I can make a suggestion for any pastor here, and that's to get on the bandwagon of Pastor Eric whenever he brings Against the Flow through.
Yeah.
Pastor Eric will tell you, we had so many adults, we had about as many adults from our church there as we had young people. And they was just amazed at how much these kids love Jesus.
Yeah.
The deacons went to some of the young men, 18 years old, started training as deacons.
Yeah.
Women started training the deaconesses up, young age. Trustees, making decisions along with the adults. We had a man there who passed away now, Paul Hamilton. He told me, he said, Pastor, he said, we're all dead here. This is going to turn into a skinny jeans church.
Yeah.
He said, because these young people don't know how to respect God's house. They're not taught. Because the older people are afraid to try to figure them out.
Yeah.
So now, when we have a concert, whether it's for the young people, the adults are there. If it's for the older generation of the church, the youth is there.
Yeah.
They've gotten together and they're winning that community for Jesus
Good,
Christ.
good.
It's not all about the pastor.
Yeah.
It's not what's behind the pulpit. It's the love of the people that sit in that congregation. Really makes that thrive.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of young folks, teenagers. We actually have 12 kids in our church now that graduate this year.
Yeah.
High school. And I think a lot of our teens are leaving, they attend other churches.
Yeah.
They did at one time. And they're bringing their families because they're so recognized and loved by the adults. So it doesn't matter what a young person did with their body when they was in the wrong.
Yeah.
How many piercings they have. Because we've all sinned and fell short of the glory of God.
Yep.
And if we would hold standards for church leaders that they hold today, there's not one church here that could hire the Apostle Paul as a pastor. It's not about change. God never changed. We got to love him the same today as we did forever. Not with phileo love, but in an agape love.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Dan, did you have something? And we'll make that last and pick up this afternoon. So.
It was interesting, as you were talking before the break, one of the books you always have another book on your shelf you can read. So there's one by Gordon MacDonald called Who Stole My Church? I don't know whether any of you have seen that, but it's one of those where folks have seen the change happen and just don't like what's happening in the life of the church. And MacDonald creates a fictitious group and brings the people together and began Bible study talking about what this is all about and how it works that way. I had the privilege of ministering amongst the folks at First Baptist Church of Dover, Delaware. And these family pastor things just never quite fit. It seems like with 140 or plus or 150 on a Sunday morning, it's a family church. Except that some of the family doesn't know each other yet. But it still functions administratively like a family, and some of you know that church as well. You happen to have a little bit larger auditorium. People on that side don't really know who these are on this side because they always sit over here. So habits are hard to break, and we are going to continue to try to figure out how to mingle together and bring them. When I heard the discussion about ink, it's interesting. Remember a generation of men who came home from World War II in the South Pacific that had anchors on their forearms and their battleship tattooed across their chest and some other kind of message here. They had Benny Lou up here, but it was crossed out, and Sally Ann was underneath it, and whatever. The same kind of messages. I've enjoyed going to restaurants and eating with people that come to the church and just say, that is amazing. Tell me how you designed that. And ask them for their explanation. And you'd be surprised how much thought has gone into that and how in some ways spiritual it is for them to be able to express themselves. I do that particularly at the NA meeting, not in the meeting, but out on the curb afterwards at our church with 60 or 70 people that are there. And the guy that shows up in a long sleeve shirt and a tie loosens it, and he's got full sleeve ink and up to his collar. But he's got a story about every one of them. And that's part of the communication, is getting the story that each of us has to share and looking for that opportunity to be able to share it.
Good.
Glad you're here.
Good conversation. Let me give it back to Dave or Kevin, and we'll regroup after lunch and continue.